Hello, everyone. Good day. It's already noon, so no good morning. Thank you so much for joining us in this live session once again. You might notice I'm at our office right now. So at least on some of the weekdays, we are gradually coming back to our office. So I'm here now. The COVID pandemic is bringing about unprecedented changes worldwide. And now more than ever is crucial for businesses to recalibrate, aim for efficiency. In that regard, we are working closely with many companies, helping them build teams of skilled freelancers with which they can get results right away without compromising quality. And as part of our endeavors to support companies in this journey, we are doing these sessions in which industry leaders share their insights and plans on the best ways to tackle this new normal we are seeing, which is quite interesting. Because one thing is for sure, after all these months of worldwide lockdowns, companies and therefore work will never be the same. So today our guest is Kelvin. He's Human Resources Director of RB, Reckitt Benckiser. So let me add him to the broadcast. Hey Kelvin, how are you?
I'm fine. How about you, Alejandro?
Doing fine, thank you. Hey, thank you for joining me in this session. Looking forward to have a great conversation. So, can you please start off by telling us a bit about RB, about your company? The brands you guys work with are definitely very well known. If you can share a bit about the company and what you do in the company.
Sure. So RB or Reckitt Benckiser is a multinational consumer goods organization, all right, which is based out of UK, and we are actually broken up into three global business units, right? One is hygiene, the other one is health, and the last one is nutrition, all right. So I'm actually hold two jobs in RB actually, right? I'm the HR director for Southeast Asia hygiene, plus also looking after the global HR shared services. So on that particular part, I cover everything, right? Now, the interesting thing about RB, right, is that a lot of people probably, it's especially in this part of the world, right, may not know or recognize the name, right? But you will definitely recognize the brands that we have, right? So especially in the current COVID situation now, Dettol is one of our brands, right? That's under the health business unit. But on the hygiene side, right, we also have other brands which are very famous, especially here in Malaysia, like Shiltox, Harpic, Airwick, Vanish, right? We also have Lysol, right, but that's predominantly in Philippines, right? So the brands that we have got huge pedigree, market leader brands, right, that's been around for quite a long time, right? It's just that we don't normally talk too much about RB in the brands, so people may not recognize it so much. But you definitely probably have one of our products in your homes right now.
Definitely, yeah. I challenge everyone watching: go to your kitchen or your pantry, take a look. I'm sure you have some of your products. Yeah. So great. That's interesting. And holding these two roles gives you not only vision over the Southeast Asian operations, but also worldwide, right? So I think that calls for interesting insights. So when you mean Southeast Asia, what are the specific countries involved in your operation?
So that would be Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Indochina, which is broken up of Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos.
Okay. All right. Great. Very interesting. But you're based here in Malaysia, right? In
That's
KL?
correct.
All
Yes.
right. Okay, great. So what's the team like? How many people are we talking about? What kind of roles,
Right. So for
broadly speaking?
hygiene, right? Basically, we are not the biggest GBU in this part of the world, although we have the most potential for growth, I would say. All right. So when you talk about the entire headcount for Southeast Asia, right, it's about 130, right, direct employees. So not that big, but that's not counting, of course, the distributor sales forces that we have deployed in all the other markets as well.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
great.
That's just on the commercial unit. If you talk about factories, of course, the numbers will then increase significantly. But let's just focus on the commercial unit for now.
All right. Okay, okay. Yeah, and that makes sense. So let's go back in time a little bit to like mid-March. That's when the MCO, as the lockdown is called here in Malaysia, the MCO started back in March, right? So can you tell me a bit about what your reaction was back then? Because as in many other countries, this was quite sudden. It wasn't something that was planned for months, right? So what was your reaction and the team's reaction?
I mean, first it was a bit of shock and surprise, and is this real? This sounds like a premise of a science fiction movie, right? So a little bit of denial at first, of course, being a normal human being, right? Um, but immediately, right, it got down to the facts and the science, right? So it was pretty clear from the outset, right, that the 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 virus wasn't as simple as people thought. All right, it's the moment that the news reports and the data was showing that it could potentially be transmitted by asymptomatic individuals. There was already a very big alarm in not just me but entire leadership of RB, right? So once that happened, right, what RB did, right, globally, it's not just a Southeast Asia thing. It was a very quick realization, and it was also because of the industry we are in. We are in health and maybe in hygiene. This is our bread and butter, right? The moment we knew those facts, right, globally there was a recognition that this could be something that would take a long time to get over. Right? It's not going to be a short term, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months thing, right? Once you also understood the fact that at that point there was not much clear evidence of treatments or therapeutics or even a vaccine, right? You knew that you're in for the long haul, right? So one of the first few things that we did, right, while the global team was preparing for the guidelines to help all the countries have a unified approach to it, right? Um, what happened was immediately there was a clear messaging from the HQ that health and safety of our employees are paramount. We will not take any risks there. There will be zero compromises there, right? And locally, what we also did, right, was even before the MCO came about, right, and we looked at what was happening in Wuhan at the time, right, we knew we had to get ourselves ready. We knew that work from home would likely be something that would be coming down the road, all right? So as a leadership team with our GM and all the other directors, we decided, right, that we would immediately do some what we call drills, right? So we started to have 1 or 2 days where everybody please go from home so that we can test our PCPs, we can test whether or not we can really operate in that manner, because you never know. It's always you always focus on the big things, but you end up realizing it's the small things that one analyst doing a particular thing in the system who cannot access the system, therefore it stops the entire chain. All right.
Right.
It's all these kind of things that you miss. All right. So that was very important. Getting everybody out from the office, let's try it. And then we picked up where there were potential issues or risks.
So
Right.
that's great. So you did that. You did these drills of having everybody working from home even before the MCO the lockdown was put in place.
Yep.
All right. Yeah, that's a great initiative, right? As you said, that allows you to find these little things. Little things, you pile up 4 or 5 of them, and all of a sudden the whole business comes to a halt.
Correct. You
All
know,
right. Okay.
and after that, right, we also received the guidelines from the global directives, right, where it was pretty clear. The first principal directive, as I mentioned before, was the safety of our people. All right. Second directive that we received, right, was a very simple rule. You know that every government across the globe will react to this in a different manner, right? So It's actually a very simple rule, but uh, it helps frame your mind when you need to make that decision in terms of gray areas between what RB is mandating and what the local country is mandating. Basically, take the stricter of the two. If the local regulations are stricter, follow that. If RB is stricter than the local regulations, follow that.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
So it's a very simple thing, but it helps you make a decision as a leader, right, in a very fast and prompt manner. Right. Don't take any risks, basically.
I like that because having a and that also speaks about how important it is to have a clear goal, right? So you had the goal of safeguarding the employees. So with that clear northern star, you know, okay, then some rules, simple as you said, but are easy to follow. We'll follow the stricter of the rules. If the government regulations are stricter, we'll go with that. Because if you have a clear goal, right, then everything cascading down from that becomes easier. Okay, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah,
And I think it's really important to have. I wouldn't say it's a goal, but it's a guide on how you make your decisions, right? Because I don't think there's anybody in this world who can come up with a fully a fully workable 5,000 page manual on how to deal with every potential situation. Right? It's
impossible.
impossible. You're gonna face that uncertainty, that situation where you don't really know what to do. Right? So when you have that kind of thinking in your head, right, you always remember, like you said, safety first, and which is the most stricter regulation, because that's the one that reduces the most risk.
Perfect, perfect. All right, all right. Very interesting. So in a nutshell, it seems like you guys were pretty quick in reacting and in realizing the magnitude of the threat, and even started drilling working from home before that was enforced. So I think I celebrate that. I think that's great. What were and you had the chance, of course, of testing this with these drills. What were your expectations of working from home? Did you expect, I don't know, lower productivity or technical issues?
So, so I'm not a millennial, right? I'm a Gen Xer, right? So we were brought up with the whole thinking, right, that work from home really, is there going to be productivity issues? Are you sure that's the right thing to do? Hand to heart, I will not lie to say that I was a big believer in it, right? There was always that question in the back of my mind whether this would really impact productivity.
Right.
But as the greatest, I call it the greatest episode of Mythbusters in the whole world right now, in history of the whole world, right? I think that myth is pretty much busted. In fact, it's pretty clear, all right, through our own internal surveys and also having catch ups and forums with our team members, right? It's actually the opposite. Productivity actually went up, all right?
All
Uh, in terms of number of hours you spend working, right? I think a lot of people, once it was in the MCO period, work from home period, right? What happened was that you don't have, unless you have family and kids to take care of, what else are you going to do, right? So it actually blurred the whole work-life balance question in mind. People used to like to do it very simple, in a very simplistic manner. Office, I work; at home, I don't work. But
right.
now it's blurred, right?
Yeah, it
So,
is. It is.
and we noticed that that was actually something that actually brought a bit of concern to us, because we realized that people were actually putting far more hours than they used to,
Mm.
right? And we felt that it wasn't too healthy also, because we didn't want a situation where people start to get burnt out and everything.
Of
And
course.
it's I would say it's totally solved, but we are very cognizant of it. All right. I don't think there's any real way of stopping that fully. Right. We've tried certain initiatives, right? But before I talk about those initiatives, right, um, the realization is everyone's different. All right. That's very true. And you can't have one silver bullet that solves all your problems when it comes to engagement during this period, right? We've tried, organizing events through the computers, having contests, having WhatsApp groups of communication where, like for instance, the GM would put a brain teaser every evening, and if you answer, first person to answer would get a token a prize, right, to claim some delivery food or something. So we tried a lot of stuff, but we realized, right, that in the end, right, everyone was different and everyone had a different way of dealing with it, right? So there was no one silver bullet that could solve all your questions or all your problems.
That's interesting, and I think it's also a sign of how complex these things can be. It's not as simple as, yeah, working from home, people will be more productive or less productive, or it's a matter of, you need to consider many other factors, and you mentioned them, some of them yourself, like having a family or not, right? It's not the same. I've had that happen doing a webinar, and my kid comes in, and just as an example, and it's a different kind of challenge, right? um, but I agree with you. Not there's no one size fits all solution. Um, so definitely, it's something to consider and to analyze, and to, you know, realize the importance of this.
I think it's important to keep your ear on the ground, right? Keep
Right.
having taps with your people, right? It's a developing situation. From there, you get what's the latest issues or pain points, right? And then try to react to it as much as you can, right? If you can't even do anything about it, at least offer that ear, right? Actually does help. That they know that we are trying our best. It's all about being together, right? Facing the situation together as a team. So keep your ear on the ground. Keep having calls, even though um, I do have calls with my team, right, where I say I do not want to talk about work. Tell me about what's happening in life, right?
Right.
So things like this actually do matter because as work is blurring into their personal life is also blurring into their work lives, right? So listen to your people. That's really important.
Okay, that's a great piece of advice. We'll quote you on that, if you don't mind. I think no, I honestly think it's great piece of advice. Simple yet, significant. Um, were there any tools that you started using more or at all during while working from home?
Sure. I mean, just to give you a bit of background, right? So for Hygiene Southeast Asia and even my global shared service, a lot of the work we do is actually remote anyway, right? Because we are managing Southeast Asia from Malaysia. So while we have teams across other countries and we do fly in to visit them, right? Um, Pretty much having Skype calls and everything was pretty normal already. All right. It's just that we took it to a whole new level,
All right.
right?
Yeah.
All right. So I think that actually helped a little bit. But what started off right is that originally when before we actually went to work from home, we were already doing certain things already. So we did we secured our office. All right, we started to prepare for temperature screening even before it became a mandated thing. All right. Um, we are already increasing the appointing a new hygiene organization, right, to support us on disinfection and everything. So these were things that we were already doing before work from home. So once the guidelines came in, it was actually a global directive from RB, right, that all RB sites will now work from home, regardless, right, of what the local norms were, unless it's mandated by law. There are certain countries in Europe that mandated that offices must remain open, right? But other
Really?
than that, it's the whole world, the all every RB employee mostly is actually working from home right now, right? So from there, right, we actually put in a few things, right? There was a directive or an agreement with Global, right, that we needed to support all our employees in terms of wellness, right? What do we mean by wellness? In the HR parlance, wellness actually covers a lot of different dimensions,
Hmm.
everything from mental to health to financial to physical fitness, everything, right? So in this current circumstance, what we did is we actually appointed a local player, all right? It's called Naluri. It's an app, all right, that basically provides our employees access through the mobile app, right, to professional advice either through a psychologist, through a doctor, through dietitians, through fitness individuals. They even have financial planners, and career coaches. So it was a initiative that we knew we had to do because we knew we everybody views wellness in this current circumstance in a very different way. So it provided all the different approaches, and the beauty of it was that they could scale up for me across Southeast Asia. So I could provide the same kind of support to my team members, regardless where they were geographically, right? So that was one of the things we did. It's basically an employee assistance program, right? And that's basically being rolled out across the globe, right?
Okay.
Then, not that particular app, but all RB countries are supposed to look into this and provide that kind of support, right? So for us, we chose to go with this local provider, right? Then other things that we also did right was to ensure that our sales teams, because we are considered essential service,
Hmm.
because the products that we provide right is actually essential for hygiene. So our sales teams were actually still operating, but we made sure that we came up with the BCPs and the SOPs right for our sales team to continue to work safely, right? So initiatives such as preparing them for telesales more than face-to-face customer meetings, providing them the PPEs so that they can visit the customers in a safe way. These are all things that we actually put in place as well. All right. But when you talk about tools, so Skype was our number one tool in the past, but it couldn't deal with the kind of pace we're talking about. We don't use Zoom, by the way. So we
Okay.
use Microsoft Teams, right? So
Okay.
Microsoft has always been existing, but now it's becoming pretty much the go-to tool alongside with WhatsApp,
Right. Okay.
right? So
Interesting. I think aside from the communication tools, which of course became the norm, all of a sudden all meetings are remote, right? So you need a solid video conferencing tool. I think it's very interesting this app you're mentioning that because it's not only just embracing a digital tool because now we are working from home. It's also about supporting the employees in other ways,
yep.
right? And you mentioned it yourself, both in terms of psychology and fitness and nutrition. So covering all sorts of aspects that they would look that they are not directly related to the actual work, but they actually are.
Mhm. So
Okay. Yeah.
so that was a very interesting one. If you were to ask me the question on how people would be using it and everything, I don't think I can answer that particular one because this is something I promised my team members from the start, right? Whatever you do with that tool, I will not ask. Nobody in RB is going to be able to ask what you're using that tool for because this wellness is a very personal thing, right? And that was a rule I set from the start. It's between you and the professional that you're talking to or messaging with, right? So nobody in RB is ever going to know what you're discussing, what your issues are, unless you want to share it with us. Otherwise, it's personal for you, and that's I think it's very important.
I agree. That's great. Safeguarding, of course, the privacy, and that creates a safe environment, right? So
Right.
employees feel confident in and feel supported in a genuine way. Okay, okay, great. So, have you hired new people in the last couple of months?
Yes,
All right,
quite a
and
few. We've had to do some introductions on WhatsApp. Unfortunately, that's the only thing that we have right now.
uh-huh.
Um, but yes, we still continue with our hiring. Um, in terms of tools, I mean, to be honest, right, nothing much new there because we were always a cluster. So we've always had interviews that we had to interview people through either Skype or WhatsApp or whatnot, right?
Mm.
Um, I don't think there was any real change there in terms of operations or tools. I mean, I prefer a face-to-face interview, but it's something I've gotten used to because of my job. Um, but for all the other organizations out there who are not used to it, right, I think it can be something that's a bit, you know, it can be a bit disruptive for some people because a lot of times, right, we are quite used to the idea of having that face-to-face interview where you can actually see the body language and everything, right? These are all cues that a good and well-trained interviewer will actually use, right? So for all other organizations out there who are still doing recruiting and having to do those interviews online, right? I can understand the difficulty. I was there before also, right? Right. But I think it's a lot of times, right? Uh, it can be overcome, I would say. Right. You focus on other things, right? So you focus more in terms of listening. In fact, right, it forces you, right, to train your listening ear a lot better.
Mm.
You'll be surprised how much unconscious bias happens in an interview. All right. So
Yeah,
sometimes when you are doing that through online, right? Sometimes I like to just close my eyes and visualize and listen. So it's difficult, but you can also take it as an opportunity to train other parts of how you're doing your recruiting and your interviewing. Right? It
I like
forces
that.
you to be really good with that.
Right, I like that, to consider it not only. So, of course, people used to conducting interviews in person, see having to conduct them remotely as a problem, right? Okay, so now I can't do them the way I want to do them. But I like your view in that, well, this is an opportunity and you can train your listening skills, as you're saying. It's a good way to frame it. Yes, there's limitations to doing it this way, but also an opportunity to develop other skills. Yeah, I think that's very interesting. And how about once you hire someone and you have to onboard them, right? Having them join a team, what was that process like?
So for onboarding, right, of course, you have your basic hygiene stuff you need to do. You need to get them equipped first and foremost, right? Getting them their laptops, their equipment that they need. All right. So those are things that we still do allow individuals into the office just for that, to get the equipment and have that session with the IS with the right physical distancing that's happening there. But a lot of our onboarding and inductions, right, are currently being organized online, right? So they are actually doing it through Microsoft Teams and everything, right?
Hmm.
Um, there's currently an initiative that not Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is part of a region called AMIA that they're actually piloting, doing a far more catered onboarding that's online. All right, so that's one of the things that we are currently working on. Our sister country in Indonesia is piloting that, so I'm very keen to hear what's that result. Then I'm gonna send and scale over. All right, but recently, there's a lot of changes that's currently happening still in the area of HR. Like for instance, I am actually discussing with my regional HR director on a pivot to e-learning. All right, a
Uh-huh.
lot of the programs that we have today, right, you can't really run very well anymore. And during MCO, right, you can't have those meetings, you can't have those trainings, and even if you could, I'm not confident I want it's safe for my people,
Of
right?
course.
So you know it's something that we are looking into to change the way we also look at training as well, right? It's always been there. We've always had e-learning, but everyone always preferred that classroom face-to-face programs, right? But this is new now. It's going to change, and it's probably going to be here for some time. So to all HR practitioners out there in the development field, training providers, right,
Mhm.
I wholly recommend you start thinking about that, because I'm really thinking hard about that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, definitely, it's part of the same trend, right? Things we can solve remotely. Well, let's try and solve them remotely. If it can be done that way, it's safer than meeting,
I
for
think
sure.
the direction was always to go more towards e-learning. All right, there was always the future, but I think this event, right, COVID-19, right, is forcing it to come alive a lot faster and at a greater pace than what any of us anticipated.
Yeah, that's for sure. There's like a meme going around in which it's a quick poll that says, who's promoting digital transformation in your company? Option A, CEO. Option B, CTO. Option C, option three, COVID. It's like COVID, all of a sudden is the biggest promoter of going digital, right? For many things. out of
Yeah.
sheer necessity. But that's yeah, that's the way it is. And it's part of this new normal, as you mentioned, that that's shaping up.
Yeah.
So in that regard, for example, so right now you're at home, you're not at
Hmm.
the office, right?
Yep.
And is everybody in your team working from home currently? Right. So
Nobody gets to go into office without me saying yes. Me and the GM approving it. Look, it's a discipline thing, you know. Um, Nobody is supposed to go to the office unless it's super critical, some sort of issue. Like for instance, the IS guy needs to go in to maintain the servers. Unfortunately, that's the reality. But we make sure it's safe for him to go in. Um, there are some individuals who, of course, requested to be able to work from the office, but we can't say yes to that, you know, because they felt that it's much more comfortable to be working there. But one of the ways we've addressed that, right, was basically our GM, right, had a tea session. He organizes tea sessions also to have his ear and listen to people, right? And one of the things we got as a feedback from the team, right, was that at first we thought some people thought it'd be 1 month, 2 months, but it's dragging, and MCO happened so fast. Nobody, unless you already had a home office, you didn't have time to prepare,
right.
right? So a lot of people were working from dining tables, coffee tables, beds, blah blah blah, lots of things, right? Don't have the right chairs, so on and so forth, right? So what we've just done, right, is that we've actually supported them. We've given them X amount. I will shall not mention numbers here, right? For our individuals, right, to purchase equipment, right, that will make their work from home environment much more conducive. There's a lot of complaints about not having the right chairs, having a bit more backaches and everything. So we quickly moved on that the moment we heard about the feedback, aligned our regional counterparts and also our counterparts in the other GBUs, and we decided to go as one company and do it for everybody.
That's great. That's great. So that makes you far better prepared to keep on working remotely for as long as needed, right? Do you already have some sort of plan in place of when you will go back to the office?
Sure. We have a global guideline, all right? So in RB, right, we can't just reopen an office based on your own local decision making. So it has to be actually approved by the global headquarters, right? There's a formal process to get this approval. I can't share too much into the details of it, right? But what I can say, right, is that there is a formal document, and we consider it from three factors, right?
Hmm.
First is the external factor, all right? Basically, what is the current situation in terms of local law, local regulations, all right? Um, Schools are open or not open. Remember, everybody has got a different personal situation, all right? If the schools are not open, how can you expect people to come back? Because nobody takes care of the kids, right? So it's in terms of understanding what's the current external situation. We do have certain guidelines on uh, what qualifies as a proper situation where you can actually reopen the office, right? Such as 2 weeks of decreasing cases within the market. Can't go details into the actual
Right, right. But
criteria, but that's what we're
it's a
looking
clear
at.
picture. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
The second one is our own internal factors. Are our officers safe?
Mm.
All right. Especially if you're in a shared location with other tenants, can you ensure that you can keep it safe for your people, right? So that requires a lot of work actually, because you need to go into the office, make sure that your current office setup in terms of layout, tables, cubicles have the required physical distancing, right? RB has a very clear 2 meter physical distancing, which is even more stringent than some local governments. Some people say some countries say 1 meter, some 1.5 meters, but we are going with 2 meters based on WHO recommendations, right? It's about ensuring, right, whether you have the right kind of transportation, So we don't recommend public transportation at all, not at
Mhm.
this point. All right, we can't stop people from doing it. We can't enforce per se, but we do not recommend it. If you don't have a car and everything, and you need to take public transportation, and it's not safe, right? It's not something that we want to go through. Um, it's about ensuring that your common areas in your workspace, right? If you have a shared facility, it's also safe for your people. For instance, if you're sharing a floor with other tenants and everybody shares the same washroom, how do you ensure it's safe for you guys? Right. So these are things that we're currently working through. The third element, right, is the individual factor. So as we mentioned, right, everybody's different, and we wanted to approach this right as a two-way thing. It's not just the company; it's about also you yourself as an individual, right, being mature, right, looking into your own safety as well, right. So it's factors such as I mentioned before. You may be staying in a home where you are taking care of elderly or more at-risk individuals, right? Do you want to take the risk to come to the office? It's your choice. You will not, nobody in RB will ever be allowed to mandate a person to come to the office when they're not ready, right? It's your personal choice. We will keep it open once it's ready, once it's fulfilled, and once it's safe, but you still have a choice whether it's the right time for you, right? So that's how RB approaches it.
Okay, that's I like the framework. So let me make sure I understood
Mm.
correctly. So three factors: from the external ones, number of cases, for example, and then the internal ones, and how is if your offices are ready, basically, and then the individual ones. So only if those three are aligned, you'll be back at
Yep.
the office. I think that makes a lot of sense, and it's sensitive and quite in line with what you said at first, that the main goal is the safety of the employees. And once again, this is a great example of how having that clear goal is makes it then a bit easier to align all of the policies towards that goal.
Yep.
All right. Okay. So, and you already briefly mentioned this. So, when you do go back to the office, it seems like the office will not look the same as it did, right? Just a few months ago. What are you thinking about in terms of, I don't know, of more spacing between desks, for example, those kinds of.
So the way we are doing our office reopening, right? We go through three phases, right? I'll talk about the first two phases because the third phase talks about the new norm, and we don't really know what it looks like right now.
Right.
Right. Okay. So we're taking a phased approach. Right. The first phase, right, once those criteria I mentioned are fulfilled and we get the green light to open up the office, right? At the first phase, only what we call, and the definition is really important here, business critical activities are allowed in. Right. So
Hmm.
you can expect less than 20% or 10% of your population back in office, right? Because truly, which roles are critical to be in an office, right? In with technology today, right? If you don't have a printer, can we not just buy you one printer if you really need it that much, right?
Right.
So what we're doing, right, is basically for the first phase, right, we really minimize the amount of people who go back to those who need to be in the office to do a certain activity. It's not business critical role. It's business critical activity that needs to be in the office, right? So we've already done that exercise to identify what are these activities, and for the most part, it's not every day. It's going to be a month-end activity or a certain critical activity at a certain part of the month, right, where you need to perhaps access a certain system or do heavy duty printing or something, right? So it's going to be stuff like that. So that's phase one. After phase one is there, and we see that declining trend and we are allowed to go for phase two is when we bring in more of the individuals to the office. So in RB, Malaysia, Southeast Asia Hygiene's uh, office layout, right, is basically 50% capacity, right? Because the current layout, we actually went in with the measuring tape to actually measure.
Oh, really?
Right? Yes. Right. So we ensured that the 2 meter spacing is actually capable, and based on that, right, we knew that we can do 50% capacity. But
Hmm.
it comes with certain changes, right? We just had a town hall with our team, right, and I had to prepare them mentally for this. Most employees are still very much into this is my cubicle. I want it to be my cubicle. But once you go to that kind of setup, right, you can't, because you're going to designate certain cubicles which you have to leave open and empty. All right, so people need to get very used to hot desking.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so that's one of the things that's happening. And I think the other thing that's also going to be very much true, right, is certain things that we've also taken for granted, having deliveries come to the office, getting your personal deliveries to the office, because most of the time people do spend a lot of time in work, and it's more convenient to have your e-commerce shopping delivered to the office. All this kind of stuff is not going to be there for the future because we are trying to keep it as safe as possible. Even visitor access and everything will be very much controlled, right? A few interesting ones which I don't know the answer yet, still working through. What about food?
Right.
Right? When they are working in the office, what do you do about food? You can't have a pantry that's full capacity. You want to avoid, and this was something we practiced even before MCO. We already stopped all sharing of food. So, some pantries have got those uh, sharing of Milo and everything, right? We already moved away from that from the start. So everything's in sachets and everything, all right,
Mm.
individual consumption. And we already stopped all sharing of food. But going forward, when we go back to the office, in a month's time or so, right, or more, what are we gonna tell our people, advise our people about food? Do we allow them to get grab food delivery? Is that safe? You know,
Yeah.
these are
That-
things we haven't fully worked out.
that's a great point, because you and you mentioned three phases, but you mentioned you don't know what really phase three will look like, and that's, I think that makes sense. It's really, among other things, what this whole pandemic and sanitary crisis is showing us is that change things change like really really fast. So some things we really just can't plan 6 months in advance, right? We need to
Right.
kind of improvise as we go, because that's because the situation escalates or changes so quickly.
Yep.
So in that regard, again, having some sort of plan, but mainly also goals, right? And I mentioned this again, like safeguarding the, the employees is great, because then you can align everything and the phases and plan this considering all of that. It's very interesting that, for what you're telling me, starting from next month, 3 months from now, whenever you go back to the office in full, it's not really going to be in full. It's going to be different in terms of food, in terms of layout and the desks and hot desking, and that's bringing about, yeah, much change to the mindsets of the employees. That's
Yep.
definitely challenging, right?
Very challenging. Even in terms of how we're going to be conducting ourselves, right? When we go 50% capacity, definitely we are going the team A, team B segregation method, right? So not all the team is going to be in the office within the week. We will
Right.
go for rotations every week. So for all HR teams out there or even employers, right, this is going to be the likelihood that's going to be there for a long time. So you also need to help them prepare, because work from home is going to be, it's still going to be there for a few months. It's not something that's going to go away just like that, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think the other thing, right, is which was pretty important to us, and I think it's something that noble that RB globally has done, right, is also to rally behind the purpose, right? So our purpose, right, has always been in terms of hygiene, right, to support people out there in terms of hygiene, right? And having said that, right, in the current COVID situation we are today, right, everything that our team members do actually does help somebody out there. All right. So what we've also done, right, is we've also globally RB has already done millions in terms of CSR to support, but also locally, right, we've also done quite a few initiatives. All right. Some examples of these initiatives, we've also done the donations to hospitals and frontline, but we also did one particular thing which It's small. I admit it's small, but I thought it was very impactful. All right, which is basically to support some of the local soup kitchens. All right, so we actually paid for them to be fully sanitized and sterilized. Right, so we are also going to be supporting them with donations and everything. But I think when you're going through this kind of situation and you want to rally your team members behind a purpose, right, you need to select something that means something to them, something that they can actually feel. So it was something that we knew that we had to get off the ground fast, and we actually did something about it.
All right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think that's great, and it's very interesting that a company, as big and relevant as RB is taking care of all of these aspects.
It,
Yeah.
it really brings it really CSR is something that's quite normal for large organizations or even medium or small ones, right? But you never really feel the impact until you have a situation like this. I'll give you an example. Our factories remained open, right, because we produce Dettol, okay, which is an essential tool, right, to help people during this period. But those workers who are going to the factory, right, every day during this period, they face a lot of things. I mean, number one, right, there was kind of like a mini curfew. Right, you could only come out of the house up to 8 p.m., but they were working from morning to 8 p.m. So what happens with their own personal lives? They don't even have time to go grocery shopping. So no problem, we buy the groceries for you. Right, we send it
Mhm.
to the factories, we give it to you. Don't have to worry about this. We'll make sure you're supported. But more importantly, like the CSR thing came to help them understand that when they leave the home every day, they're doing it for a greater purpose. Because at the start of it, right, there were a few questions. We listened to them. Some of the workers were telling us, right, that their own families were worried, their neighbors were worried about them going out. And when we gave them and clearly showed them that what they do leads to the donations that help the doctors and everything, they could see the purpose and they know why they're doing this, why they're taking this risk, right? And we recognize them for that. So I think
Okay.
it's really important to drive behind the purpose locally.
Mm, okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. And thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I think yeah, it's amazing that you guys are doing that and having and communicating this kind of purpose, right? To have everyone committed and aligned. That's great.
Yep.
All right. Great talk. So wrapping up, a final thought. So the goal here is to, and you've been doing this in sharing, your insights both in terms of the policies and your own ideas and views on all of this. So to wrap up, what would you communicate to other business leaders out there? Um, what do you think it's an actual opportunity that has come up of all of this?
Well, I think there are two ways of. It's a very, very big question. But if you're talking about from a business perspective, right? Yes, there's a lot of questions actually. Don't have all the answers, but we definitely have lots of questions. What's going to be the economic climate, right? There's been talk of recession in multiple markets, and it had to happen. When you shut down countries for months, right? Something will happen, right? So I think it's really important for most organizations to at least try to understand that impact versus their own businesses, right? That's point number one. Point number two, right? More relevant for RB, especially, right, is the fact that when it comes to consumer habits, right, it it will change. We just don't know how far it will change yet. What I mean by this, right, is because we are a hygiene organization, right? How often in the past before COVID do you actually mop your floors, wipe your services? It has changed, right? Will this continue? We don't know yet, right? Signs are it will, right? So consumer habits will change, and when consumer habits change, I remember you are sharing a portion of the wallet, right? So if they start spending on switch spending or change spending to one area of consumer goods, how does that impact your business, for instance? Right. So consumer habits will change. Shopper habits will change. We were talking just now at the start, right? E-commerce has seen the boom with COVID-19, but it has also come to the realization, right, that the biggest question for scalability of e-commerce has always been the last mile, right? Delivery, a lot. I'm sure there's a lot of people who are listening to this call, right, had that issue, right, where they ordered something and it's going to take a month or so to be delivered, right? So is e-commerce really to take up the slack fully of offline retail? I don't think so, not at this point, because the last mile question is not yet resolved. And for e-commerce organizations, right, I don't envy your position. Do you scale up? Scale up quite requires investment, but what happens when if the consumer or shopper habits changes back to a mix of offline sales as well? What do you do with all that investment that you put into? Don't have the answer. Lots of questions, but I think these are big macro situations or trends, right, that everybody needs to be thinking of. From the people perspective, HR, a lot of change I think is going to happen. All right, I think there's going to be a lot of change. I'm an introvert myself. Working from home actually has never bothered me, right? But that's just me. A lot of other people have a different mindset. I, in my constant talks with the team, right, it's mixed.
Hmm.
Some say I miss the office, I want to go back. Some say actually I quite like it working from home. Can we continue? I don't have a real answer to this yet, right? But I think a lot of attitudes towards how we work, and I think flexi work, right, is going to be a big norm going forward, right? How that will figure, don't have the details yet, but it's something that we are actually actively thinking of. That new norm that I'm talking you about, that I just described earlier, right, is something that globally RB is looking at. There's actually a project looking into it, right? What would that new norm mean, and how would that mean to our current work policies and everything? So we're actually actively looking at it, just not ready at this point.
Right, of course, and that makes sense. But I think it's a great overview, and you said it yourself. We definitely don't have the answers, but there are certain certainties. Consumer habits will change, shopping habits will change, and HR, right, is definitely already changed. And and it's great to know that an industry leader such as yourself and RB are, as you said it yourself, actively analyzing how flexi work, uh, how to make it work basically, and how it's impacting the business and how to work with that. Some people can't wait to go back to the office. Some other people are say, hey, I'm okay doing this. And of course, and then safety and all of the SOPs and measures that need to be taken. So it's great that you guys are actively considering this and not so taking the lead and in shaping this new normal, and not just sitting this one out and see what happens. I think that's a great insight. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
Kelvin.
sorry, one last thing. I mean, recently also I've had some talks or discussions with other HR leaders out there, asking me what are you guys doing? Can we share? Can we brainstorm? I mean, the only advice I would share what we talked about, right? It's not my place to talk about it, but the one bit of advice I give to everybody, right, is don't approach this question with the first question on cost. It should not be a cost driven question, right? That's the best advice I can give, and that's my own personal approach. It should not be a cost related question, because once you get into it, right, you ring fence yourself, right? So it's much more important at this point, right, to be listening much more, gathering as much different insights before you even talk about cost, right? Because there were a few talks about that,
Of course,
reduce
of course.
rental, blah 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 blah. I said, no, please, I think it's a bit too early for you guys to be even thinking about that.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. Okay, great. So yeah, thank you for sharing. And Kelvin, this was amazing. Thank you very much for joining me in this session. It was quite informative. It's definitely very, very insightful. To learn how uh, you guys, and worldwide you have like 40,000 employees. I think it's definitely relevant to hear how you guys are thinking about this and tackling these unprecedented and challenging situation.
Yep.
So thank you very much for joining me. Thank you everyone for watching live, or if you're watching this the recorded session, thank you for watching. And
Thank you, Olive.
yeah, thank you, and we'll keep in touch. Okay.
Thank you for having me, Alejandro.
Yeah, my
Thanks a lot.
pleasure. Yeah,
All right.
keep safe.
Bye. Yeah, you too, definitely.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Thank you. Goodbye.
Okay, bye.